104.5 The Team, your home for New York Yankees baseball. We are joined by Buster Olney. Buster, I feel like this is what we start with every week now. Are the Yankees going to be sellers?
Well, I do think, and someone who's known Brian Cashman for 20 years, he's become very adept at dealing in the New York market and dealing with the media, and he absolutely believes in the idea of preparing your fan base. And so when he gave voice on Tuesday to the idea that, they might be sellers, they might be buyers, they might be sellers or buyers, they have to declare themselves one way or the other, I think he's preparing the fan base for the possibility that they're going to be sellers. Because let's face it, the way they're playing right now, the best that they probably would hope for, if you gave them truth serum, would be a wild card spot, and that they'd be competing against a lot of different teams for that. And big picture, it would be better for the Yankees probably to execute some sort of a sale, because the market prices for Andrew Miller, for Aroldis Chapman are sky high. And so I think that, while Brian probably would love it if the Yankees were to win the next 20 games, I think the fact that he talked about this out loud tells you he's getting ready in case it goes the other way.
Mm-hmm. Buster Olney joins us on 104.5 The Team. Buster, I defend Cashman a lot because I feel like he's one of the few guys that you can look at and go, okay, the rules changed for him. He originally had an open checkbook. Now he's got financial restrictions that he never had before. But when he talks like that, I'm glad you put it the way you put it, because for me it sounds like he's not even sure what they are.
Well, I think that what they are is a team in transition. That's the honest answer. And they're still theoretically within this window in which they'd hope that they would get enough production from their older guys where they would compete. But Mark Teixeira has had a terrible year because he's been injured. And Alex Rodriguez, in the next to last year of his contract, is not the same. And some of their young pitchers haven't produced it the way that they expected. And, they've already started some of this transition by adding young guys like Didi Gregorius, like Aaron Hicks, like Starlin Castro, but they clearly need more. I don't think anybody could argue the opposite, and that's why, especially when you're dealing with volatile assets like relief pitching, if you're going to get maximum value, that's usually going to be in the middle of a season, because that's when teams like the Rangers, like the Cubs, like the Giants, like the Nationals might look at it and say, you know what, Andrew Miller is the difference between us being good and being really great. Or, maybe one of those teams looks at Aroldis Chapman as being the final piece to a puzzle to win the World Series. And I think that's why that Brian is preparing both paths.
What about the Mets, Buster? We've had more and more Mets fans calling in, just like they did last year, wondering if there's a Cespedes-type deal on the horizon.
Well, it's very complicated because it seemed like last year they had so many holes that they were trying to fill with guys who were part-timers, and they weren't really established major leaguers, and so it was easy to go out and grab particular players, starting with Uribe, starting with Kelly Johnson, and then moving on eventually to Yoenis Cespedes, because they had such a range of holes. But now it's harder to sort of define those, because you could arguably go out and look for an outfielder, but you already have some guys that fill that spot. You'd essentially have to be acknowledging that Michael Conforto is not going to play the rest of the year, and I don't think they're ready to do that. You could go out and get a third base, a long-term solution. For example, you could call the Tampa Bay Rays about Evan Longoria and have an interesting conversation, but in order to do that, you'd have to be able to internally completely write off David Wright, and I don't think they're quite to that point, although I think any honest assessment would be that it's unlikely that he's going to be able to produce a lot moving forward. So they have to try to thread this needle and look for guys who can help them in the short term without costing too much. And I actually think there's some nice options. The one that I really like a lot, because I think it would augment their defense for a team that's very pitching and defense-oriented, would be to call the Cincinnati Reds about shortstop Zach Cozart, who's a terrific fielder, and then move one of the other infielders over to third base. I think that would be the best solution, but from what I understand, the Mets are not that deeply into this process. They really haven't gone out there aggressively looked at alternatives yet, because they're still trying to define exactly how they're going to approach this.
Buster, one of the, easy answers for Mets fans is, well, we'll send him Zack Wheeler. But after last night's game where Bartolo Colon takes the comebacker off the thumb, and since Terry Collins has said he's going to make his next start, which I find very difficult to believe, let's say that Bartolo goes out and he doesn't have it. That takes away that trade piece of Zack Wheeler, correct?
Well, it may not do that because they may choose – it may be that they feel like the most value you're going to get out of Zack Wheeler now would be as a trade piece because they don't know what they're going to get out of him the rest of the year, because his throwing program was just shut down, with elbow soreness, which is not unusual in a pitcher coming back from Tommy John. But I do wonder if that news in itself mitigates his trade value to some point, where other teams might have been looking at Zack Wheeler as, a guy who was going to come back and would be able to help, whether it's, this year or next year. But he kind of reminded everybody that coming back from Tommy John surgery is not always a seamless issue. And so I would bet they would wait until Zack Wheeler, it's determined exactly what his situation is before they choose an option as to whether or not to deal him. But he is, without a doubt, probably the guy the Mets would push in a trade because Matz has less service time. Syndergaard is Syndergaard. DeGrom is less service time. He's younger. And Matt Harvey, at his best, is someone that you potentially could be to a Game 5 of a World Series with.
Buster Olney joined us right here on 104.5 The Team. Buster, the rumblings also that we're hearing, and it started as, no way, we don't want Jose Reyes. And now the Mets, we're hearing, might be softening on that stance for Jose Reyes. If he did become a Met, both faces of the offseason domestic violence in Major League Baseball would be in New York. That's not a great look for Major League Baseball, right? No,
it's not, but I've long since, I think, rid myself of the notion that teams really are aggressively taking moral high grounds on this issue. I mean, or any issue for that matter. For the most part, as we saw with the Cowboys, for example, and some of their decisions, if you can play, you're going to find a home and a place to play. And I do think that probably the Mets feel like this is more of a unique situation because they've had Reyes before. They had a really good experience with him. They really liked his personality, and I think this is born out of desperation and the fact that there's almost nothing to lose. Because once he's released and cut free by the Rockies, and I would assume that that's going to happen sometime this week, then the Mets could go to him and say, look, show us if you got anything. Go to the minor leagues, play some games. And show us if you can, not only continue to be a guy who hits well the way that you did for us before, but someone who can play positions other than shortstop. Because, guys, there's a real question about whether or not he's still a major league player. Evaluators who saw him at the end of last year were saying he's not a major league shortstop anymore. He's not a major league caliber hitter. And maybe his situation now puts a giant chip on his shoulder and drives him, but the Mets are in a position where they can essentially park him in the minor leagues at virtually no cost and see if they have something.
Buster Olney joins us, Levac and Wolf, 104.5 The Team. All right, so Buster, the Cleveland Cavaliers, they have their big parade today. They end that 52-year championship drought in Cleveland. So my question to you is, does the curse of the Billy Goat go down this year, or do the Cleveland Indians maybe, or even the Texas Rangers kind of get in there and say, no, we're going to go ahead and win some?
I think that the Cubs are going to win the World Series. I picked them back in January. I'm sticking with that pick. I think they're incredibly talented. I think they have a great clubhouse culture. Joe Madden has done a great job of getting the players very much at ease with the pressure that they would have. And let's face it, I mean, they would have more pressure going in the postseason than any team that we've seen, I think, in professional sports, probably since the 2004 Red Sox. And I think they're going to finish it off. I do think that they need a late-inning left-handed reliever, and that's why I think Theo Epstein and Brian Cashman are going to be on the phone a whole lot before the August 1st deadline. And I know that the Cubs internally feel like there's no way that they would give up Kyle Schwarber for a short-term reliever, but let me tell you something. I've seen executives through the years say, no way, no way, no way, in the last 24 hours before the deadline, when they have an opportunity to accomplish something like the Cubs do, that they may change their mind. And I do think that in a lot of respects, Miller would be the perfect guy for them because he'd be under contract for 2 more years. And I have questions. If Kyle Schwarber stays with the Cubs because of the questions about where he would play, I don't think he's necessarily a great fit for them going forward. So I would not at all be surprised if those conversations gather some steam as we get close to the deadline.
Buster, let's talk Cy Young. National League, Arrieta, Kershaw, or Strasburg?
Kershaw. And this for me is a no-brainer. And I think I told you guys this story a few weeks ago that I was having a conversation with Madison Bumgarner. He looked at me and asked the question rhetorically, are we seeing the greatest pitcher of all time at his absolute best? And I don't think there's any question that is what's going on here, because we've never seen anybody do anything like this. Not Walter Johnson, not Roger Clemens, not Greg Maddux. A.J. Ellis's catcher, told me about how he had put a greater focus on throwing a quality first pitch in each at bat rather than just throw a strike to get ahead. He was executing a better pitch, and since the beginning of last July, guys, he has a 1.38 ERA. That's almost a calendar year. 1.38 ERA, 302 strikeouts, and 24 walks.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah,
we've never seen that. And for me, Kershaw would be the guy.
Buster Olney right here, 104.5 The Team, Levac and Wolf. Buster, I see this weird, yet another group of athletes getting caught up in a Ponzi scheme. Mark Sanchez, who's with Denver Broncos right now, but also Jake Peavy and Roy Oswalt. What is the story here? What happened?
Well, we'll see if this has more tentacles, but basically a financial advisor is, according to the Security and Exchange Commission, they filed charges against his financial advisor that he had defrauded these three out of about $31 million.
Oh,
we'll see if this has more tentacles, okay? I think that's one thing worth remembering. This may just simply be a first strike in this whole situation, but Jake Peavy, Mark Sanchez, Roy Oswalt, I've dealt a lot with Peavy through the years, and I went down to Mississippi to visit Roy Oswalt once, and the first thing I thought of when I heard about the story was going to his family's home. He's from a family of loggers, guys. Okay? This is not the knucklehead who buys 75 cars and 55 houses. This is someone whose grandfather was taken out of the woods by his family as a logger when he was 78 years old and immediately started a watermelon farm. His father was logging in the woods well past when Roy was making tens of millions of dollars. It's a family with work ethic, and you just feel terrible for them that essentially they, if the charges are true, they were tricked out of a whole lot of money, and how devastating it would be to spend all that time pitching and playing, and your career is over now, and a lot of your money is gone.
Buster, not to make light of this, but is there any chance the Wilpons will have to pay that money back?
Wow. And, is it amazing that it always seems like there's – I guess when you people with a lot of money are involved, and there are probably other people asking them for their money.
Absolutely. Buster, what do you got planned for this weekend? Where are you guys going?
Well, I'm actually going to the College World Series in Omaha, and so I'll be there for a few days, and then on Sunday night, we've got the Pirates, and we have the Dodgers, and the aforementioned Mr. Kershaw is scheduled to pitch on the game on Sunday, so very excited about that.
Buster, we love you for making time for us always, and go enjoy some baseball. We know it is your absolute passion, which makes you the best at covering it.
Thanks, Buster.